Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Today we're going like headfirst into a story that's sending shockwaves through the Broadway community, the passing of the incredibly talented Gavin Creel, and the kind of explosive controversy sparked by actor Zachary Levi's comments. You ready to unpack this?
Let's do it. This situation is like a prime example of how grief, speculation, and the spread of misinformation can collide, especially in the digital age, especially when you add in a celebrity with a massive platform.
Okay, so for those who might not be totally up to speed, Gavin Creel, a Tony Award-winning Broadway star known for his incredible voice and charisma, sadly passed away recently. Zachary Levi, who you might recognize from Tangled, and She Loves Me on Broadway, where he actually co-starred with Creel, decided to share his thoughts on Instagram. And let's just say his take wasn't exactly well received.
No, not at all. Levi publicly speculated that Creel's passing from a rare form of cancer, a sarcoma, might be linked to the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, it's important to note here that Levi isn't a medical professional and didn't have any personal knowledge of Creel's specific medical situation.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting. Because Levi's comments weren't just met with a few raised eyebrows. They ignited a full-blown firestorm of criticism, particularly within the tight-knit world of Broadway.
What's fascinating here is how Levi's comments tapped into a very sensitive nerve, both within the Broadway community and beyond. The timing, the lack of medical expertise, and the highly sensitive nature of the topic of fellow actors' death all contributed to the intensity of the backlash.
It's like throwing a lit match into a powder keg. And one of the most powerful voices to speak out against Levi was Tony Award winner Norbert Leo Butz, who you might know from Wicked. He directly called out Levi's comments, calling them disappointing and accusing him of politicizing Creel's death. He even said he was heartbroken because he knew Creel would have felt the same way.
But his response is particularly striking because it reflects the deep respect and affection that Creel had within the Broadway community. To see Levi, someone who shared the stage with Creel, seemingly using his death to promote an unsubstantiated personal viewpoint, was deeply upsetting to many.
And it wasn't just the big names on Broadway who were outraged. The fans were absolutely furious. Social media exploded with anger and disappointment. I saw people straight up telling Levi to keep Gavin Creel's name out of your fiffing mouth, which, doesn't leave much room for interpretation.
There was definitely a sense of betrayal and disgust. One particularly poignant comment I saw came from Twitter user Noah Delgado, who said it was ghoulish, manipulative, and utterly inhumane to exploit Creel's death to spread misinformation. It really highlights the ethical concerns surrounding using someone's death, especially in such a public and sensitive context, to advance a personal or political agenda.
Absolutely. And it brings up some serious questions about respect for the deceased and the impact these actions can have on their loved ones and their legacy.
Exactly. And amid all the anger and controversy, there was this beautiful, almost counter movement, urging everyone to shift the focus back to where it should be, celebrating Gavin Creel's life and work.
Which is so important, right, to remember the incredible artist and person he was beyond all this noise. And one tribute that really stood out to me was from Laura Benanti, who was also in She Loves Me with Creel. You might know her from her spot-on Melania Trump impressions. She shared a really heartfelt post calling him a prince, a saint, and an all-around great person, emphasizing his positive impact on everyone around him.
Her tribute and others like it are so powerful because they remind us that even in the face of tragedy, we can find solace and inspiration in celebrating someone's life and focusing on the good they brought into the world. And it underscores the fact that Creel's story is about so much more than just this controversy.
Okay, so we've got this explosive mix of grief, speculation, misinformation, and a whole lot of anger. Where do we even go from here? Well, stick with us, because in the next part of this deep dive, we're going to explore the ethical dilemmas surrounding Levi's comments, the impact this situation is having on Creel's legacy, and how this whole story shines a light on the dangers of misinformation, especially in times of grief. You won't want to miss it.
This whole situation really brings to light the power and responsibility that come with having a platform, especially in the digital age.
It's like everyone has a megaphone now, right?
Yeah.
But not everyone understands how to use it responsibly. It's so easy for misinformation to spread like wildfire, especially when it's attached to strong emotions like grief and fear.
And when you have someone like Zachary Levi with his huge fan base and public image, making these kinds of claims, it adds a layer of perceived legitimacy in the eyes of some people, even if those claims are completely unsubstantiated.
Which is terrifying when you think about it. It's almost like we're constantly battling this tug of war between freedom of speech and the responsibility that comes with it. Where do you even draw the line? How do you balance someone's right to express their opinions, even if they're controversial, with the potential harm that spreading misinformation can cause?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, there are no easy answers. But I think a big part of the solution lies in fostering critical thinking skills. We need to encourage people to question what they see and hear, to evaluate sources, and to be wary of information that just confirms their existing biases.
So it's not about shutting down certain voices or censoring opinions, but about empowering people to think for themselves and make informed judgments based on evidence and critical analysis.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of healthy skepticism, where we approach information, especially online, with a discerning eye, particularly when it comes to sensitive topics like health and science.
And maybe, just maybe, a little more empathy wouldn't hurt either.
Absolutely. Imagine if instead of jumping to conclusions or spreading unverified claims, we approach these situations with compassion and a willingness to understand different perspectives.
I mean, think about it. It's clear that Gavin Creel was deeply loved and respected by his community. Wouldn't it be more fitting to honor his memory by focusing on his talent, his kindness, and the positive impact he had on the world?
Without a doubt, shifting the conversation away from divisive rhetoric and towards celebrating someone's life and legacy feels like a much more constructive and meaningful approach.
And ultimately, isn't that what we all want? To leave a positive mark on the world and be remembered for the good we brought into it. So before we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a moment to reflect on that. How can we use our own voices, whether they're big or small, to spread kindness, understanding, and accurate information? It's something worth thinking about. Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive, and, it's been a heavy conversation, but I think we've really uncovered some important things to think about. So as we start to wrap up this whole discussion, what do you think are the biggest lessons our listeners should take away from all this?
Yeah, one thing that really stands out to me is how this whole situation with Levi and Creel brings to light the blurred lines between freedom of speech and the responsibility that comes with it, especially in the age of social media. It's easy to forget that words have real-world consequences when you're just, typing away on your phone or computer.
Right? It's like everyone has this megaphone now, and sometimes it feels like they're just shouting into the void. But those words can actually have a huge ripple effect, especially for people like Zachary Levi, who have these massive platforms and huge fan bases.
Exactly. And it's not just celebrities who need to be mindful of this. We all have a responsibility to think before we post, to be aware of the potential impact of our words, especially when we're talking about these really sensitive topics.
So it's not just about what we have the right to say, but also about what's the right thing to say, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, beyond just being careful about what we ourselves are putting out there, I think it's also crucial to cultivate a culture of critical thinking and media literacy. There's just so much information flying around these days. It can be really overwhelming to try to figure out what's true and what's not.
It really is. It's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes. So how can people become better at, sifting through all the noise and determining what sources are credible and what information is accurate?
Well, I think one important step is to be more aware of our own biases. We all have them, and they can really distort how we perceive information. We tend to gravitate towards sources that reinforce what we already believe, even if those beliefs aren't actually based on facts.
So we need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions and be open to hearing perspectives that might be different from our own.
Exactly. It's like stepping outside of our comfort zones and exposing ourselves to a wider range of ideas.
And then once we're exposed to those ideas, we need to really engage with them critically. Ask ourselves tough questions about the source, the evidence they're presenting, and whether or not it actually holds up under scrutiny.
Yeah, that's really what critical thinking is all about. It's
Right.
not just about blindly accepting what we see and hear, but about questioning everything and looking for the evidence to support or refute those claims.
And speaking of evidence, it's important to remember that there's a human element to all of this. We're not just talking about abstract concepts. We're talking about real people who are grieving a loss and who deserve our empathy and respect.
Absolutely. So as we move forward from this whole controversy, let's try to be more mindful of the power of our words, more discerning about the information we consume and share, and more compassionate towards those who are hurting.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But remember, this conversation doesn't end here. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep sharing your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Until next time, stay curious.